Dean, is it okay if I record this call and put it on my YouTube channel?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Cool. So I think maybe we cover your Latin America experience more, and then maybe we go back towards the end and just sort of touch on your recent trip to Southeast Asia, since I think so people will get the correct impression about you. You have such a rich knowledge base about Latin America, and that they'll be listening with that perspective in mind from the start.
Sí, tengo bien conocimiento de América Latina.
Wow, that's a beautiful accent. So tell us, Dean, what year did you first leave the U.S. and start living in Latin America?
Completely, it was 5 years ago. Before I was just doing winters.
You were just doing winters. Okay, let's start with that. What year did you start doing winters?
It would be about 2002.
Wow, that's quite a run. 18 years you've been doing a winter, or 13 years, and then the last 5 you've been doing pretty much full time. And where did you first start doing your winters? What part of Latin America?
Because I was a windsurfer, I started going down to Baja California Sur, in between La Paz and Cabo San Lucas, and camping on the beach with other windsurfers. But that was when people were putting ads in newspapers to meet girls. So I put an ad in the La Paz newspaper and met this Mexican girl from Mexico City, and ended up marrying her. Back then I didn't speak Spanish, and she was learning English, and so I thought to myself, oh, why do I need to learn Spanish? Because my wife speaks that. But then after we split up, then I knew I had to learn Spanish. Yeah, her sister-in-law read my little ad that I put in that. They didn't even have a personal column. I put it in help wanted.
How funny.
I only got two answers, but she was one of them.
Wow, that's a great story. And so how long were you married?
She came over to visit her brother there in La Paz, and then we dated for a few days before she returned to Mexico.
And so you used to go down for winters. Would you go down in December and come back in March? How did you, and where were you in the States at that time, spending the rest of the year?
Oh, I was in the Hood River area.
Wow, you were.
Columbia Gorge.
That's the best windsurfing spot.
That's the windsurfing capital.
Yeah, of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would go down there to the Baja in late October, early November, and stay until, well, some people would stay until the end of March. Then the wind starts dying out.
So you probably had very little expenses during that time when you were in Mexico, because you were camping on the beach, right?
Well, actually, we were in an RV park, but it was really cheap. And one guy had a satellite dish, and everybody daisy chained off it, so we watched whatever he watched. I shifted location to another place where it was an RV park. It was like a camping place on the beach, but there was no power or water, so we had solar panels.
You've been all over Mexico, and by the way, everyone, Dean has a channel, a YouTube channel also, which I'll be providing a link to this later. But so your experience is quite wide in Mexico. So give us an idea of the parts of Mexico and other parts of Latin America that you spent time in over the last 20 years.
All are parts of 26 of the 31 Mexican states. And I've studied Spanish in Antigua, Guatemala for a month. That's how I got my first good indoctrination in Spanish. One winter I was in Honduras, where I had a girlfriend there. Stayed there for a couple of months. And I've spent time in Nicaragua, a couple of months there. Then, before the internet and all this travel stuff really got going, I bought a moon travel book, and that was my guide for my first visit to Ecuador. I hit Ecuador before the big rush to go into Ecuador happened. So I spent over a winter there, and I started a bed and breakfast there, and I thought I was going to. And another thing that's kind of notable about me, because I was born in Canada, I have 2 passports, and so my plan was to do 180 days American, 180 days Canadian, and I did that one winter in Spain.
Oh, fascinating. So
that's a big advantage I have for that. And
so
then I started internet dating. I I wound up marrying a Colombian gal, and that marriage didn't last very long, unfortunately. And when I left her, I headed back to Ecuador, and then I got a pensioner's visa because I was like 63 then, and so I qualified for the pensioner's visa. So I had a Ecuadorian cedula. I lived in Cotacachi that time, where a lot of expats live. The first time I went to Ecuador, I lived on the coast of a place called Bahia de Caracas. That's really a nice place. Well, at least it was until the earthquake hit there.
So you're
in the winter, it would be clear.
So in my world, I would call you a slow traveler because you spend months. It's not unusual for you to spend a month or more when you go somewhere and really investigate it, get to know what it's like. And so that's what I feel is unique about you, is you have this international slow travel experience that there's a large interest in these days, especially for retirees, and they're often curious, like, oh, if I become stable in one place, I can get my bills down because I won't be flying around and staying in hotels as much. I'll be able to just pay rent and this sort of thing. So give us a perspective. What would you say the budget difference is? Is it really that much more to be a slow traveler, or are you able to find, or how do you do it to keep your budget down, if I might ask?
Well, it really opened up there when Airbnb came on board. That's when it really became possible to be a slow traveler and to do travel on a low budget, because your accommodations price went way down. Plus, most Airbnbs, you could use a kitchen, and some even would let you use the washing machine. So that really brought your expenses down.
And so tell us, what's an example budget for you when you're traveling around Latin America? It probably varies a little bit by country, but what numbers do you like to stay around when you're planning your travels?
Well, $300 a month for accommodation, more or less. Sometimes, if you're going for just a couple of days, then you could be paying like, 12 to 15 a night even. Although I usually shot for 10. And then if you're staying for a week or especially a month, you can get a really good deal. And the best deals are when someone's new to Airbnb, and they'll give you like maybe 40% off for the month, plus an extra 20% off because they want to get the ball rolling. Because you'll be like, for the first, I think it's 3 to 5 people get an extra 20% off. And I've stayed in places for $200 a month. Like when I was in Mendoza, Argentina, I stayed in a house for $200 a month, and it was a nice place too.
Cool.
They were just getting started.
Very nice. And so it sounds like you follow a tradition that I do, is I'll pick, rather than find one I'm absolutely in love with, I'll pick 5 or 10 that I think are quite adequate, and I'll make offers on them, and one of them will accept. Is that what you do on Airbnb?
No, but because Airbnb, I've stayed at almost 100 different Airbnbs now. There is some pitfalls, and you have to be real careful. You have to ask questions, because some of them, back in earlier days, I would just rent a room, and so you have to be careful. Some of them, it's a house, or it could be an apartment, where they're renting out 3 or 4 rooms. And so those are a lot less attractive, because then you have competition for the kitchen, competition for the internet, and they're less secure.
Right.
Because if you're just with the owner's chances are they're not going to rob you.
Right.
It's like staying at a hotel. In hotels, you have to be careful, because there's a lot of people who have access to your room.
Right. Right.
And travelers like you and I, the only thing we really have of importance is our computer and our camera.
Right.
And our phone. Well, phones are usually with us now, but those are the things that could get stolen, and it would make a serious dent.
Yeah.
And I always have a external hard drive with me that I separate, so if I did get my computer stolen, I would have everything on that external hard drive.
Great point. I do the same thing. I put, I'll hide the computer and then I'll also hide the hard drive in a different spot, and try to be clever. So if they get one, they don't get both. So 300, up to 300 on rent. And what do you spend on other things in general?
Well, the last something my dad did when he retired, he had a little book he'd write down everything he spent money on. And I thought it was kind of silly at first because he didn't itemize it. So, about 7 or 8 years ago, I started doing that. I started keeping track of every peso I spent. And then I knew how much I could figure out how much I was spending on food. And I would usually incorporate restaurants into that too. And then I had a beer budget and things like that. So I could itemize things out. And I mostly eat lunch out, and breakfast and dinner, most of them, especially breakfast, I eat in home. And dinners usually tend to be a lot more expensive. Where in Latin America, there's a lot of people like in cities, the workers, they're not making a lot of money, but they all go out for lunch. And so you can usually get a lunch for $3.
Yeah, exactly.
A little soup and a main course and they call it agua, which is like kind of a watered down juice, and then sometimes even a tiny dessert. So lunches are cheap because, you have to figure that, I'm living on 1,000, like what you put out there, I'm living on 1,000 a month now.
Right.
And in most of these countries, making 1,000 a month is a dream for most people, for the average Jose,
Yeah, and the average Jose also has, a mom or dad and a wife and a kid or two. So it is a lot of money the spending power you have.
Mm-hmm. So I had this little saying: you can't win the game, change the rules. Now, living on 1,000 a month in the U.S., I'd be living in a van.
Yeah.
And down here, I feel like I'm almost upper middle class.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
And so, and then, in some of these smaller places, which I tend to go for, there's less things to spend money on.
Yeah, and even the restaurants are a little cheaper. There's fewer distractions. It's more about maybe, investigating an authentic town that's been much the same as it has for 50 or 100 years, rather than going to a newer city where there's high rises around and a lot of distractions, and it doesn't feel feels more worldly, if you will, than whatever country you're investigating. So tell us, one of the things I've noticed about you that seems similar to me too is that you go to a country and you investigate it on the ground, meaning like you'll go from city to city on what in the U.S. we call a Greyhound bus, rather than try to fly somewhere, and you'll eat in local restaurants and that kind of thing. Tell us a little bit about that, if that's true.
Yes, in most of the parts of Latin America, I travel by bus. In Mexico, now they've got budget airlines that have pretty cheap flights, but I've actually traveled all the way from here a couple of years ago when the Argentine peso crashed. I thought, I've always wanted to go to Argentina. That was when I flew to Buenos Aires, and then, then I flew to Mendoza. Argentina's a huge country. And then I traveled by bus, to Chile, Bolivia, Peru, up to Ecuador, and then finally out to Colombia again, where you could get a cheap flight from Bogota to Mexico City. So, and then down there, the buses are pretty nice. If you travel by night, you can sleep on the bus. It saves you a hotel room night. It saves you the expense of a hotel for that night.
What you probably remember the TV show. A friend of mine who's a really big traveler. But he's still working too. He just travels as much as he can, and we touch base once in a while. And he calls. Remember the TV show called Kung Fu?
Kung Fu?
Yeah. with David Carradine.
Oh, with David Carradine?
Yeah.
I love that show.
He says you remind me of Kung Fu. It's like you just wander around the planet and you really sort of get to know each place you go to. You're not rushed. You eat with the locals. You ride buses. You have a low profile. And you really get to understand the world and you get a real feeling for it. But one of the things that people don't understand or they get confused about or they wonder about because they watch the news or they hear how dangerous it is. So you and I have traveled all over South America, Mexico, and we ride these buses around and we eat local food and we kind of live a local life, if you will. But people think, oh no, I need to stay in a 5-star. I need to fly. I need to take the hotel's limo. It's a dangerous place. You don't want to be around locals and all this sort of thing. What are your feelings about safety in Latin America? What are your thoughts about that? And what are some of the tricks you have just to make sure you're okay?
Well, the common sense is never to be walking in seedy-looking neighborhoods by yourself. And knowledge of Spanish, of course, is helpful in that way. Because otherwise, some people will tend to take advantage of tourists and travelers by not giving them a good price. I remember once I left a bus station, took a taxi to the hotel, and after I got to the hotel, next day I said, well, I got to go to the bus station. It turned out the bus station was only 2 blocks away. The guy took me on a little tour. So I started asking in bus stations, I go, well, how much is it more or less to go to this destination to some local guy? And they'll say, oh, that might be 40 pesos. So, I could get a ballpark price and nobody could really slip it to me. Here in San Cristobal, Zacatecas where I'm at, it's like 40 pesos, 35 to 40 pesos to go almost anywhere. So that's, $2 for a taxi ride. Very few places have meters, so you do have to ask the price first, unless you're in a smaller place like this where people just, they're more casual and they're not out to really rip off tourists like places like Cancun and those areas where they get a high volume of tourists that have what you call well-heeled tourists. Have a lot of money to spend.
And so in general, do you, with your common sense, watching on what's going on around you, do you generally overall feel safe when you're traveling around the world like this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then, you need to avoid places where you see a lot of graffiti. One of the worst places in Mexico for graffiti is Mazatlan. Except for in the tourist zones. Once you get a block or two away from the tourist zone, it's so much graffiti, it's unbelievable. And that's gang stuff, that. There's like one kind of graffiti where they draw pictures and stuff like that, but then the other kind of graffiti is what they call taggers. People that's like the gang's territory, this area or something like that. So that's when you see a lot of tagging going on, this is not a good area to be in.
And that's an important distinction between tagging and what I call artistic or street art graffiti. Which
right.
in many parts of Latin America, you'll see some of the most beautiful street art in the world. And I literally mean just beautiful. And there's a difference between that and tagging, which is marking territory, almost like a dog when it pisses on a tree or something. A good example is in Medellin. They have that area, Medellin, Colombia. It's I can't say it in Spanish, or I don't remember it, but it's Community 13, I think. And they have just some of the most beautiful street art in the world there. And but if you wander off outside of the, if you go too far off the hidden path, you'll begin to see tagging there. And that might be a concern. So good, important distinction to bring up. Thanks for that. And so what are your thoughts? Like what is it that drives you to want to see the world and go to places? Clearly windsurfing is a big motivation. But what are some of the other things? What does it feel like for you to be traveling to these places and seeing the world like this?
Yeah, windsurfing was my original catalyst to get me traveling. I windsurfed I lived in a place in Colombia once, where not far from Cali, up in the mountains, where there was a reservoir where it was windy there most of the year, and there was local windsurfers, and also Costa Rica. There's Lake Arenal, where in the winter it's very windy on one end of the lake. And then after I hit about 58 or 59, I more or less gave up windsurfing, and then that's when I really started traveling. Now, one thing to note, and you, Dan, like to go into larger cities. In all these larger cities in Latin America, parts of them are very nice. And so they're like islands. You're living in Medellin, for example, you'll be staying in one area most of the time, because if you go in the other areas, they're kind of like, they're not really that desirable, and there's nothing to do in them. So you'll be like in a small city after a while, because in Medellin or Bogota or any of these places, the area where you feel comfortable in or enjoy being in is actually fairly small.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you're in a little city, a pueblito, it's almost the same thing. And then when you live in these areas, you don't really need a transportation. Just take a bus or walk most places.
Right.
I go grocery shopping, I'll walk to maybe 20 minutes to the supermarket, and then take a taxi back because I got too much stuff.
Yeah, that's really a good point. And one of the ways I do that is I look for wherever the most beautiful pictures are online, and then I look those buildings up and put them on a map and try to be in the middle of them somehow. The other thing you'll notice on a Google map is that the area that has the most foot traffic in a city often is an area like that, and it has like a tan area on the Google map. And if you get into one of those tan areas, that's where you can walk, which is real. I love walkability. So what do you think drives you, though, Dean? What drives you to travel the world? What's the underlying feeling you get when you go to new places?
Well, I guess you could call it searching for that pot of gold over the rainbow. Just think, well, maybe the next place is going to be it. I've written some articles for a magazine, and it went down the tubes. It was called Escape from America. And I wrote articles for them. And I had one article called Pineapples. So they call the newbies in Costa Rica. They come there with, all these glorious aspirations and things they've learned on the internet. And doesn't take them very long. They buy a place, and a year later or so, after the thrill wears off, they're ready to leave. So they're harvesting more pineapples. They just turn around and resell their plates.
I had a comment exactly like that recently. A guy that bought a place in Costa Rica and had to sell it for. That's why I recommend people don't buy for the first year or two. They really need to go visit these places and really feel it before they decide to make a purchase.
Oh, yeah. Easy to buy, tough to sell unless you want to give it away.
Right.
But one thing, Dan, that used to really bother me back in the early 2000s, when the internet was really taking off, and these websites were springing up like weeds, promoting this place or that place. And what they were doing was paving paradise, putting up a parking lot. You remember that song?
Yeah, of course. Great song.
People were exploding. They're ruining the places. Next thing you know, all the gringos come in and the prices shoot up. And so I was kind of down on places like that. Where your website, you're more or less just kind of taking people on a tour and pointing out some prices and this and that. My websites, I just mainly show things. I don't put too much dialogue in. But now I'm thinking about redoing all of them and narrating them. So now that I can just play them and put a voiceover. Because I love flamenco music, and so all my earlier Ecuadorian videos, they all had flamenco music or instrumental guitar music along with my subtitles. I thought was real pleasant. But, you can't monetize those. So
Yeah,
with my new channel, I'm thinking about doing that.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I enjoy watching your videos because I like your choice of what you shoot pictures of, and I think you do a nice job with your videos. And I mentioned this before, but I mean, to the listeners, you know, we'll put a link to Dean's channels, but so they can go enjoy them too. But and I enjoy the music, so I enjoy watching them, and it gives. And as I said, I like to see pictures of places before I decide to go there. That's one of the things that tells me if, because I'm very visually oriented, and so I really like your videos. But I think that just because of your knowledge is so unique, it's so unusual, and it's honest and it's real. That if you went with a narrative, if you started adding those at least to your future videos. Even if you don't have time to go back and do all your old ones, I think you'll provide a service that people will really appreciate, because you can. The knowledge is as important as the visual aspects, and that's one of the things I do with mine. I try to provide them with something pretty to look at, and then give them useful information while I'm showing them beauty, so they at least are learning while they're appreciating a place. And you just drop a few ideas into each video, and people, it gives them kind of a context and a feeling that you're a real person and that it's a real place, and then a few tips maybe about the place or things you've learned, and that will draw people back over and over again, get them to subscribe and stuff. So with your deep knowledge of Latin America, well, if there were only three tips you could give to new people that were going to start slow traveling around Latin America, what would they be? And I realize I put you on the spot here, but what are your thoughts about that? Like, what are something you know now that you didn't know when you first started?
Well, I think a person needs to start in Antigua, Guatemala, where there's over 50 Spanish schools where you can get one-on-one instruction. Back when I first started, it was $5 an hour, and now it's $7 or $8 an hour, which is still pretty cheap, and do like 4 hours a day. And then for like $100 a week, more or less, you can stay with a family. That includes room and board. You get meals, 3 meals, 6 days a week. On some days you eat out, and so you need to do that for a month, and that will get you a pretty good basis in Spanish.
And that's a beautiful town.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite towns too to be in while you're learning some Spanish.
Oh yeah, it's become a little touristy now, but there's still, the indigenous people are there everywhere, and it's just like night and day, the difference.
So great tip one. What's tip number 2? Does one come to mind?
Well, then after that, you need to go to places where there are less tourists, so you will be forced to speak in Spanish. And then after that, I guess I would advise people just to start visiting places where that they're interested in. Like if you're want to be by the ocean, well, there's taking a slow travel down the coast of whatever country. Some countries only have 1 or 2 places that are actually doable on the coast. Or if you want, like myself now, I like a more comfortable climate. Well, then you need to be in a higher elevation. In the United States, a lot of retirees, they call it snowbirds. They go down to Arizona or Florida or somewhere in the winter and in the summer. So you can do that in Mexico and other places. In the winter, it's comfortable by the ocean. And then in the summer, you head for the high elevation. So you can be a snowbird in Mexico. I got a kind of a secret tip here. If you want to live in Mexico, you can do what we call the I've invented it, the Tijuana turnaround. Now, you're allowed 180 days in Mexico. Well, because there's a lot of traffic that goes in and out of Tijuana, you can fly to Tijuana, and when you enter when you enter Tijuana, you're in the border zone. But you know, you don't even need anybody can walk into the border zone. So when you enter Tijuana, you've left Mexico, basically. So then you can just fly back the next day, or even the same day, but usually the next day, you can fly back into Mexico and get another 180 days.
So they don't look for the exit stamp when you hit immigration. Let's say you fly into Mexico City or Puerto Vallarta or whatever. They don't look for the exit stamp from the last visit, or they just know you left because you're flying back in.
Well, the last few years they've eliminated exit customs at the airports, or at least in Mexico City, or I flew out in Guadalajara too, where unlike they call it passport control in Europe and every other country. It's like before it was like U.S. and Canada were the only places they don't check you when you're leaving. And so now you turn in your tourist card either at the when you check in at the airline or when you're boarding the plane. So actually, I don't know. Maybe they keep track with, if you overstayed your visa, I don't know what would happen there if you just left at the airport. And the only thing is, if you try and do that by land, like some people, they'll get frowned upon for trying to do that by land. Because I still don't know exactly the ins and outs about it, but like here I am in San Cristobal de las Casas, just a couple hours from the Guatemalan border.
Yeah.
I could do that there. Or I might just try to do the passport switcheroo. But I'm not sure if they're checking for the exit stamp from Guatemala.
I see.
Now you're probably aware of Lake Atitlan, not too far from Antigua.
Yeah. I haven't been there, but I almost went there when I was in Antigua. I didn't get up there.
Well, there, and I think in Antigua too, there's some people that have connections, and they're not too hard to find. These guys will do what they call passport runs. They'll take your passport, for a fee. They'll go up there, and I guess they know the border guys, and you get stamped. And then you come back in the next day or so and give them your passport, and instead of making that trip up there, which takes all day each direction, and it's not a fun trip either on the buses. So that's kind of a sly way to do it.
Yeah.
But, and there's a lot of people that do that in Costa Rica. Every 90 days they go to Nicaragua for 72 hours and then come back, or Panama.
Yeah, and this is another reason I have a video which the top 10 mistakes international travelees make. One of them is that they're, the first month they get somewhere, even before they go somewhere, they try to get a retirement visa. And the thing is, if you get to go to the place, whatever they give you, whatever, 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, the first visit, then you start talking to the locals, you'll find out all these things that people do. You may not need to get a retirement visa. Have you ever bothered to get a retirement visa anywhere? Ecuador. Ecuador, right? You mentioned already, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ecuador and Nicaragua are really easy, and so is Panama. The income requirements are low. Income requirement in Ecuador is $800 a month. I guess Nicaragua I heard it was $600.
Yeah.
Panama is $1,000. Mexico is quite high, actually.
Yeah. So. Wow. So
I think some people they get oversold on the idea of living in Costa Rica or wherever,
Yeah.
So that's why they sell everything, and then they're, well, I'm just going to go there and it's going to be paradise. And those are the pineapples.
Yeah, and it's kind of silly too, because I don't know what that's about. And the other thing that people seem really set on is they have to buy real estate, like I have to own my home. I can't be a renter. I don't get that. I mean, you have this, you're retired now. You have no more headaches, right? Hopefully you have some kind of pension or money coming in. The world's your oyster, but you want to buy one place in one part of town in one country in the world and park your ass there and that's it. I mean, why not enjoy the world? At least go to 5 or 10 places before you make that decision and spend some time
yeah, you would think you would want to go to a few places, but most of these places, again, I mean, these people, they don't speak the language, and so they want to go somewhere where there's expats, and that narrows things down very significantly. You know, in Mexico, you're talking Puerto Vallarta, San Miguel de Allende, and 𝐂𝐒𝐒𝐒 by Lake Chapala.
Yeah.
Those are the three places where there's plenty of gringos.
But you know,
And the new one is
go ahead. The new one.
is Puerto Escondido,
Oh, right.
Oaxaca.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's I
a
want
lot of
to.
gringos there now.
I want to check that out. I haven't been there yet. Of course, Oaxaca is my favorite state in Mexico, but I haven't been to Puerto Escondido yet. That's on our list. I hear.
Well, I visited here in San Cristobal a couple of times, but usually just 2 or 3 days. And now I've rented a really nice apartment. Well, I'm paying a little extra, $350 a month. But it's completely furnished. It includes all the services, and it's really nice. And it's right downtown area.
That's such.
A new, completely remodeled. It's new. It's like living in a new apartment.
Oh, that's such
So
a.
I'm going to give it 2 or 3 months here and see if I can deal with the rain. Because I don't think you can live any cheaper than here. And there's 3 major supermarkets here, and so you can get anything you want here.
It's a wonderful nightlife too. If you like live music, you can just wander around there in the evening, and people are playing music on street corners. And then there's a lot of Europeans that have moved there, so you have all these restaurants of different countries. And
yeah, oh, it's amazing. I'm 2 blocks away from that stuff.
yeah, it's a great life.
And if not, another one of my second favorite place is Oaxaca. I spent 2 or 3 months there before. But I've noticed that the rents are higher there, and there was less Airbnbs in the desirable areas.
Yeah, you have to.
In my price range.
You have to hunt a little bit. Yeah, so I don't remember.
I found this place where I'm at now in a website called Segundo Mano, which means second hand. And in Mexico, it's like a Craigslist type place, and then they have a real estate section. So I found this rental from that place.
Very cool.
Century 21 was running it, but it turned out to be a good deal.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for that tip. Well, Dean, I really appreciate you're taking the time to talk with the subscribers. I want to encourage them to go visit your channel and listen and watch your videos and listen to your wisdom, since you're going to start with that soon, it sounds like. And you're welcome to come back anytime you like to share more of your wisdom and your experiences. And let's just finish. Let the listeners know you just came back from a trip in Southeast Asia, which of course wouldn't have gone too well because you arrived, I think, just right before coronavirus hit, and so you probably didn't get to move around as much or experience all the open restaurants and that kind of thing. But what's your overall feeling of the difference between what you've seen in Southeast Asia and in Latin America?
Yeah, I went with the original idea of touring Southeast Asia, a 3-month visa in Vietnam, and then I was going to go to Thailand and Malaysia, then the Philippines. And after I got there, the things got serious, and then they closed the borders, and then I was stuck there. But I did travel around. I started in Da Nang, I visited Hoi An, and then I went to Nha Trang. I was inspired by your videos there, Dan, and then went to Dalat, then to Saigon, then to Phu Quoc, and then I went to I went to Hanoi, and I had to get the visa extended. Boy, it was so hot there. After I got that visa extension, I flew back to Phu Quoc for the last month. Oh, okay, and what I liked about Vietnam, it was so safe there. I mean, I couldn't believe it to see policemen with no guns. It's almost comical to see these bank guards standing out in front of banks or, like jewelry stores with no guns. I mean, there was a few policemen that had guns, but that was only in certain situations. And the prices were so low there. I didn't use Airbnb. I only used Airbnb there a couple of times. I was staying in hotels for $10 to $12 a night that had, they were nice and air conditioning. Every place had air conditioning, but it was unbelievable through Agoda. I think I got that tip from you too, to find cheap places everywhere. Huh.
And so, if you were to pick,
But I didn't have real good luck on the food scene there, but other than that.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. It's Vietnamese is one of my favorite, but it's definitely not for everyone. So if you were going to rank the top 3 favorite spots in Vietnam, if you had, if you were going to stay longer, what would be your top 3?
Oh, it'd be Phu Quoc, number 1, and then Nha Trang and Dalat.
Great choices.
But I like the Dalat and Nha Trang. You could, like, if you're living in Dalat for the climate, you can go down to take the bus down to Nha Trang for a week break every now and then, and things like that.
Yeah,
so I thought that was a really good good route there. And you put Nha Trang as your favorite place, so it was really nice in Nha Trang. And so that would, to me, if I lived in Vietnam, I would try to live around Dalat, and I would go visiting Nha Trang, 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, so that's you, me, and Chung Hoi. All 3 of us find that area of Vietnam a big favorite. And it's nice when it gets a bit warm. You can go up to Dalat, like you're saying, and they have that beautiful lake and cooler weather because of the elevation. They have those tea gardens, and it's a nice place to tool around for a week or 2.
Yeah, the hardest adjustment in Vietnam is dealing with all these motorcycles. It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
Nobody walks there. I tried to walk. After walking 3 or 4 blocks, you're sweating, and then I can see why everybody's on a motorcycle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's warm.
Because of the heat.
Well, Dean, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm sure our subscribers appreciate it too. And slow traveler, traveling the world for about $1,000 a month. Is that a fair assessment?
That's easily doable on $1,000 a month, and that would include, a little budget for beer and go out and have a drink once in a while. And I want to tell you, your listeners, that now I'm Gypsy Dean. I love Gypsy flamenco music, and because I'm a traveler, I decided to adopt that name.
Gypsy Dean.
Another channel in Ecuador, Dean. I started that when I was living in Ecuador.
Yeah. So I
originally.
Go ahead.
I originally started my Ecuador Dean channel with YouTube. There, it was just a way to preserve my memories. Somebody showed me this Picasa program. It was free in Google, and it was kind of basic, and that's what I started on. And now I have better programs, make better videos, but it just started out as a way to preserve memories, and then photography is my hobby, so one of my hobbies, so it evolved from that.
Yeah, so on YouTube...
Now I'm a guitar player, and I'm going to be sitting out in the park playing my acoustic guitar, and maybe I'll attract some people, and I'm going to put up a little sign, 3 English grammar lessons, or English conversation lessons, free. That's a way to meet people when they want to
great.
Practice their language.
That's great. Yeah, and you could put a time on there. Sunday, Thursdays at 8 and Sundays at noon, whatever, and people will know they can come back later if they're busy when they walk by. That's a great thing. That's a great way to meet people. Great way to become integrated with a new place that you show up in.
That's right. Yeah, you got to get in. Otherwise, you'll be lonely. I felt a little lonely in Vietnam, so it was hard to meet. There wasn't too many expats there anymore.
Yeah,
the language barrier.
Yeah, I hear you. That would be tough. And when a lot of the expats left, and because of coronavirus, and a lot of the stores in the tourist areas were closing, it had to be rough for you.
Yeah, it was. I didn't imagine it like that.
Yeah.
I was inspired by the cheap $388 plane fare from LA to Da Nang. That's what got me. That's what I always wanted to go there, and after I seen that, I said, okay, now it's the time to do it. Well,
Totally.
if I would have known they were going to close the borders, I wouldn't have went.
Yeah.
I didn't imagine they were going to do that.
Well, Dean, thanks again, and we'll chat with you soon. You have a great day. This is Dan of Vagabond Awake. Hey, don't give up on your retirement dreams. Come check out our Retired Cheap reports all over the world. You can probably retire somewhere in the world beautiful like this for much less than you thought. Thanks for watching. Click the link below this YouTube video. Please click the link in the notes below this YouTube video to get a copy of this content. Pause the video now to read this important liability disclaimer that limits your rights. You can also find this disclaimer in the description below this YouTube video. Basically, your reliance on the information in our videos is strictly at your own risk. So seek appropriate professional advice before taking any action on our videos.